say, I'm delighted to welcome you all to today's chat with His Excellency Kerim Üras, Turkey's ambassador to Canada. We have quite a large audience for this event, and that's why we've asked everyone to mute their audio and their video. And the people on the call represent a range of sectors. We've got SMEs on the representatives from SMEs. We've got representatives from larger firms and organizations. And together they represent such key business sectors as aerospace, advanced technologies, agriculture and agri-tech, construction and infrastructure, education, energy, engineering, healthcare and life sciences, machinery, mining, and transportation, along with financial services, legal services, tourism services, and business consulting. We would like to extend a warm welcome to officials from all three levels of government in Canada. This includes from Global Affairs Canada in Ottawa, and to Canadian Embassy and Consulate personnel in Turkey, including His Excellency Cemal Kokar, Canada's ambassador to Turkey, who spoke at a similar event the CTBC organized last year. And Jamal will be also speaking at this event. Representatives from Export Development Canada, or EDC, are also on the line. Officials from the province of Ontario and from various Canadian municipalities have joined us as well. We would like to recognize Nurdan Erbu, chairperson of our long-term partner organization based in Istanbul, the Turkey-Canada Business Council, or the Turkey-Canada Business Council at the Foreign Economic and Relations Board of Turkey. Nurdan is the founder and chairperson of Anadolu Hayvancılık, or Anatolian Livestock in English. Earlier this week, she coordinated and chaired a very well-attended webinar that targeted Turkish and Canadian organizations in the agri-tech sector. We're delighted that Nurdan's predecessor, Osman Okyay, is also on the call. And we would certainly like to welcome the Turkish diplomatic officials, both from the embassy in Ottawa and the three consulates general in Canada. And that includes the three consuls general. As for today's agenda, after our CTBC chair, you've already met him informally, the Honorable Gar Knudsen, introduces the ambassador and invites him to make some introductory comments. We will begin our chat session with the ambassador. When we have finished asking our questions, time permitting, we'll open it up for written questions from folks on the call. If you use the Zoom feature to send them in, and we'll select from them. We expect the session to end around 12:15 to 12:30. And I think that's about it. Gar, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Mike. It's a real privilege and a delight for me to be with everyone this morning. When Mike told me that we had 120 participants, I thought that was an incredibly good response, and it's a tribute to Mike Ward's hard work. And before I begin with my official function, where I briefly introduce the ambassador, I want to give kudos to Mike for setting today's session up. His Excellency Ambassador Kerim Üras has been in Canada since December of 2018. I got to know him a little bit in his first year here, and then COVID struck, and he, along with many others, is sort of on my list of people to wish I could do coffee with and go to lunch with and meet with him on a more regular basis. But as we all know, COVID has made that difficult. His background is quite impressive. Just prior to coming to Canada, he was the chief foreign policy advisor to the Prime Minister of the Republic of Turkey. He has served as ambassador designate to Israel, ambassador to Greece. His diplomatic postings included serving in London, England, and Hanover before that. So he is obviously, from his credentials, a high-ranking a person within the Turkish foreign service, and I think it's to Canada's credit that we have someone of his prestige working in Ottawa. So Ambassador, those are interested in his personal circumstances, he's married and has 3 children, one of which I've had the privilege to meet. So Ambassador, it's nice to meet you again, albeit by Zoom, and we are delighted that you were able to join us today and provide us with your insights on fostering commercial relations with Turkey. I think, as most of us know, the relationship currently, well, it's a solid relationship with lots of history and deep roots. There's areas for improvement, and certainly we all know that the times that we exist in, as the world more generally, are difficult and challenging. And I think it's a real privilege to have us with you in Canada, with us in Canada, and as I said, a privilege for have you with us today. So Ambassador, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Minister Knudsen, for your kind words, and thank you, Mike, for organizing this good event. As you were speaking, I see the number of participants clicking up, so I'll say a few words and wait till we reach a full house, and maybe we'll give more to the question and answer session. CTBC, of course, I encourage you, and I know I'm preaching to the converted, but CTBC is doing a great job. I encourage you to support this institution, and Mike is a great chairman, with also Gar Knudsen's kind help. It's one of our solid pillars of the relationship between Turkey and Canada. I'm also very happy it's your lucky webinar today. You're getting 2 ambassadors for the price of 1. And my distinguished colleague, Cemal Kokar, the Canadian ambassador to Ankara, has kindly agreed to join us. I welcome Ambassador Kokar. It's nice to see you online. We also have my colleagues. First of all, our consul generals. I can't see everyone, but I think Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal will all 3 join. I also have 2 counselors, Pınar and Utku. I welcome them. And our trade counselor, Hakan Aygün, is also with us. And I understand there are also a couple of diplomats from Canada in Turkey serving. So we have quite a good pool of knowledge here. If there's anything I can't answer, I'm sure my other colleagues will chip in, and we can hand over the floor to them when the time comes. A few words in Turkish with your permission. Soğuk Kanada'dan herkese sıcak sevgiler, saygılar ve selamlar gönderiyorum. Orada akşam oldu Türkiye'de. Buradan katılan Türklere de çok selamlar. Her zaman kapılarımız açık. Bu vesileyle hepinizi görmekten de çok memnun oldum. Şimdi bir iki de Fransızca söyleyeyim. Et pour notre participant francophone, une chaleureuse bienvenue à tous. Vous savez que quand c'est Canada et Turquie, le dénominateur commun est anglais, malheureusement. Interactive as possible. So I'll only say a few short words to warm you up, allow the other participants to join us, and also maybe give you some food for thought for our discussion. Now, talking about Canada-Turkey relations, I think it's a very promising relationship, but not one which has reached its full potential yet. And why I say this, when I came to Canada, GAC, the Foreign Office, told me that they made the head count of mutual delegations, and the traffic in the last 2 years, This was about a year after I came, so I can only credit for half of this activity. But for the previous 2 years, the number of delegations in both directions had surpassed the number in the previous 75 years. I think that's a striking count. So it also gives you an idea of where we are going and how things are going. That is very promising, and I take pride in that figure. But just as we were picking up more speed and our relation was really taking off, COVID struck. So that was a big spanner in the works, and it slowed everything down in our life. However, we have adopted and adapted, and now we are meeting online. Maybe under normal circumstances, we wouldn't be able to get such a crowd together. So like every crisis, it has its advantages, and also if you know how to make use of it, there are benefits. So I am confident that we will recover and bounce back quite fast. And we already are, actually, because in the past months, our president and Prime Minister Trudeau spoke a couple of times. They were good discussions. Our minister spoke with the previous Minister of Foreign Affairs 7, 8 times. And only yesterday, Minister Çavuşoğlu spoke to Minister Garno on the phone, as you might have seen the tweets. It was a very good and fruitful and warm meeting. And I think Cemal and I take pride in this. So there was a joint agreement to give a boost to our relations, not only in mutual visits, but only in concrete terms, in economic terms, which I'm sure would interest you more. Now, I would like to maybe leave the floor to Mike, and maybe Ambassador Kokar might want to say a few words, but I'm sure you will have good questions. I think the elephant in the room is COVID and how it affects the relationship, what we can expect in the future, what will happen, how it's changed, and also the promising sectors, which we can touch upon. I intend to be transparent and open, and please don't be diplomatic. Ask tough questions, however you feel, and I'll do my best to try and answer them. Thank you.
Ambassador Kokar, would you care to say a few words?
Thank you very much, Mike, and congratulations to you and, of course, Gar, for putting together this wonderful event, as my good friend Kerim Üras has said. And good to see you as well, Kerim. It's been a long time, actually, and we actually should do this more often directly. It's great to have this crowd with us, but terrific that you're on. And I just want to say one special thanks again to our friend in Istanbul, Nurdan, for all the wonderful work that she's done to support the work of both councils on both sides. And while Ambassador Üras did not make reference to it, I know that will come up in the conversation, but we're both anxiously looking forward to putting on the JETCO, the Joint Economic Trade Commission meeting later in the second semester of this year. As Ambassador Üras mentioned, COVID prevented us from doing that earlier. But I think it's going to be a kind of a new and innovative sort of format that we have, and maybe actually more interesting than the previous ones that we tend to do in the past. The government stuff is always interesting, but usually only for government people. And I think what's exciting is drawing in the private sector, and I think we're very excited about that. As Ambassador Üras said, I'm relatively new to the file, more so than he has, so I give more credit to him for helping really, and my predecessor, Chris Cooter, for having really sort of invigorated the relationship and driving up the number of bilateral relationships and visits and communications between our leaders and foreign ministers. But we're delighted to see that even in these difficult times, that level of communication, direct communication continues. Of course, neither Kerim and I think it's enough. And we continue to push on both our ministries to try to get the people speaking more often and more frequently, and ideally at one point in time to visit. I think it should be noted, Kerim mentioned that the phone call happened yesterday. And if you think about that, and not that we should read too much into signaling, but I think we do take pride in that, that very early on in the minister's mandate, both ministers reached out. It was Minister Çavuşoğlu who reached out specifically to say, let's have an early call. Our minister agreed. And I think that's something to be said about both the importance of the relationship, the health of the relationship, and as Kerim said, notwithstanding several elephants in the room, of course, any good relationship, or like all good families, there are always tough conversations to be had, but the important thing is that we know how to have the conversations respectfully, openly, and with the spirit of working together towards strengthening the relationship over the long term. So, of course, we always go through difficult times, and there's positive times. So, and I'll end on the one final point that Ambassador Üras brought up, and it was the same thing that President Erdogan raised with me when I presented my credentials, and I spoke to this at this last presentation. That's about potential. And the potential that really exists is driven forward by the private sector on both sides. Governments can do a lot to help create and strengthen the enabling environment. But at the end of the day, it's the people-to-people links. It's the strength of the relationships that exist between our private sectors, our academic sectors, our non-for-profit sectors. And at the end of the day, a true bilateral relationship is a relationship between people. It's not about governments or only governments. So the fact that we have such a turnout today, and the fact that there's a vibrant trade relationship, and I think it's recognized that the trade relationship is a good one, but without overestimating it either, there's lots of room for growth. And I think that's what's in Ambassador Uras's intention and mine, and the fact that we have our trade teams there. We have a strong set of councils, both in Turkey through Nudan's group, and in Toronto and Canada through Mike and the group. We really need to find ways to help advance this, not only in terms of the traditional sectors engagement, but to draw in a whole new generation of companies and interest into driving this forward. I truly believe that there's lots of potential there. So with that, I'll turn back to Mike and Kerim. But thank you very much for the invitation. And one final note, it's only because of Kerim that I had to shave and put on a tie today after 3 months of sitting downstairs. So I do this out of my respect and friendship for my dear friend Kerim.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador.
If I may say a word, just to intervene, you're right. I think the tie is dying a slow death. I was on many webinars, and I saw I was the only one with a tie. So I agree with you. Thank you.
Well, we've reached I think a critical mass in terms of registrations and signups. I did want to mention that Michelle McCollum, from the chair of the Brampton Board of Trade's on the call. So that's good. We're targeting Brampton as a key market for doing business with Turkey. And I want to thank the two ambassadors. This is a wealth of heads of mission with the two ambassadors and consuls general on the phone. Thank you very much for your useful comments and for setting the stage, if you will. So I'll start with the first question. And it's that the world is built around this concept that the world is still experiencing unique and tough challenges as a result of the coronavirus. COVID-19 has impacted virtually every country socially, politically, economically, and certainly in terms of international trade. That has definitely been the case for Turkey and for Canada. If we had this discussion a year ago, it would have been in a large room with many in attendance, and we would have all been using superlatives to describe some of the substantial new milestones in the Turkey-Canada commercial relationship, because we were on a very high trajectory back then. So with that in mind, I'm hoping you can give us a snapshot of what the business environment is like in Turkey, what it was like in Turkey back then, prior to the onset of COVID-19. And then moving to the present, tell us how the pandemic has impacted the Turkish economy and the business sector.
Thank you, Mike. I'll try to answer that. As we all know, the economy is being transformed by very strong forces due to this pandemic. And it's, I think, accelerating the trends that were already there and changing economies fundamentally. Like automation is speeding up, consumer behavior is changing quite dramatically. Working from home has now become commonplace and even quite productive. So things are changing. There are many businesses which I was participating in a webinar the other day organized by the Belgian CTBC. And they invited Deloitte's first chief economist, Craig Alexander. And he said, we will see that after the pandemic has cooled down, we will see a lot of zombie businesses. I mean, what we see is going on now actually is quite vulnerable. Some will emerge stronger, some will just disappear. But so I think we have a fundamental transition coming. How it affected Turkey, we looked into this and we broke this down with my trade counselor and my colleagues into a few groups. And I think we should look at this matter, the shock, the impact and policy responses it brought, the initial effect, the outlook, how will the recovery be, policies, what should be adopted, monetary policy, fiscal policy, financial sector policy, and mitigating long-term effects. If I can just touch upon those very briefly, maybe I'll give you some food for thought and we can further elaborate if you're interested. Well, as we know that Turkey entered 2020 with pre-existing vulnerabilities. And the pandemic exacted a painful human and economic toll. The initial policy responses to the pandemic led to a sharp rebound of GDP. But this policy response also exacerbated the vulnerabilities. So the recent policy pivot, which we might call it, is quite welcome. And the tightening of the monetary policy and the slower credit growth is most welcome. There is a recovery on the way, but with significant risks looking ahead. The economy is expected to see continued positive growth in 2021. But as I described, the low buffers mean that vulnerabilities will remain. I wouldn't want to say high, but that depends on us and how we manage it. But there is a risk there. Policies, due to these vulnerabilities, we are now redesigning our policies and working hardly on it. You must have, those who follow Turkish politics must have seen yesterday our president announced that there is a big economic and legal package coming. So this underlines the fact that we are fully aware of the vulnerabilities and that some things need to change, which is a good thing. And I know the work is fairly advanced. Our president has announced that the package will be announced and come to Parliament in the beginning of February, so quite soon. And we are aware that a further shift in the policy mix is needed. And a rebalancing of policies that is sustained over time would definitely underpin durable medium-term growth. Looking at monetary policy, a strengthening of credibility and buffers is important. A firm monetary policy stance will be maintained. This is the main drive. Further measured monetary policy might be needed, and this depends on if the inflationary and growth targets are met or not. And it depends on developments, which we will see. So that means that there will be a very hands-on adjustment. Looking at fiscal policy, addressing pandemic-related needs, To address immediate needs related to the pandemic, additional targeted and temporary fiscal support will be deployed this year. We will see that in the package. In parallel, a credible and detailed plan for fiscal consolidation is expected to be adopted, and post-pandemic recovery is fairly well underway. Fiscal structural reforms will support consolidation and mitigate financial risks. I think we have already made some headway on that. Debt management should continue to be strengthened. This is one of our determinations. Lengthening borrowing maturities and lowering reliance on domestic foreign exchange borrowing should be continued to be strengthened and closely monitored. As we all know, the financial sector policy is very important for stability, economic growth. We have to rein in credit and strengthen balance sheets. This is easier said than done. The continued normalization of credit growth is a positive development in that respect. Legacy issues on banks' balance sheets is something that warrants our close attention. And bank foreign exchange liabilities warrant careful monitoring also. Mitigating long-term effects of the pandemic, risks of long-term adverse effects to the pandemic on the labor markets and non-financial corporates is very important. This will be addressed through targeted measures again, and this I expect to be part of the upcoming large package. This, of course, doesn't happen in isolation. I mean, you can easily design an economic package with experts, but for this to go ahead and for it to take effect, you also need to stabilize the international scene. And if we look at what happened in 2020, Turkey, despite the pandemic, has been very busy. Just to mention, in November, the troubles in the Caucasus and the 30-year-old occupation came to an end. We really regret the human loss and suffering on all sides. It's a terrible thing. No one wants hostility. But I think that episode alone was something that happens only once in 30, 50 years. So it was a very important fundamental development in the region. Ironically, I think it opens up terrific new opportunities for building bridges with Armenia if they are clever enough to make use of this. And I hope they will be. We will encourage them. This will maybe open up our border, encourage trade, encourage development, and take a lot of how would I say, negativity out of the region. Similarly, Syria. Syria is very important. We've been busy there too. And you know, we live in a rough neighborhood. So needless to say, that's an overworked cliche, but it's true. And the Eastern Mediterranean has been very busy and unstable. Libya, the same. And if you look at, I haven't even mentioned Iran, so our other neighbor. But looking at it all, I think our government, at least as far as it's up to us, is very determined in stabilizing issues and re-energizing our relations with the EU. Our minister has been to Brussels and has come back with promising news. Our relations with France are developing. There was a letter exchange with President Macron, so that's good news. I think the stars are aligning for a bounce back in the remainder or the upcoming days of 2021. Of course, the challenges are immense, not only for Turkey, but for the whole world. And in that respect, our partner Canada is very important. It's a relationship we attach great importance to. Turkey is a G20 country, although due to our latest our latest difficulties in the economy, we have slid down a bit in the echelon, and we are from the 16th, 17th largest economy down to 19, 20. And Canada, on the other hand, has done quite well. It's advanced from being the 10th largest economy in the world to the 9th. That was also due to the slip of Brazil, of course, but that underlines the potential we have for the two countries. I mean, two G20 countries, two NATO allies, and like-minded countries, democracies in the region. If we try, and I think we can do much better. Canada wants to diversify and is looking at Turkey. Turkey is one of the countries in the atmosphere where relations with China and other traditional partners is slipping a bit for various reasons. Turkey is a promising country, and we can go into that further on. That's what I have to say at this stage. Thank you.
That was a very full answer. Thank you very much, Ambassador. I wanted to move on to picking up on your point about the new measures that the government has announced. So, but I wanted to take a look at both economic and judiciary reform. So, in particular, what of the new planned economic measures might be of interest to Canadian firms? And the second part, what about judicial reforms? What have you seen or heard? Is there a sense that the planned reforms will increase foreign investor confidence in the Turkish market?
Thank you. Being the Turkish ambassador, I'll answer that with Cemal Bey's permission. Yes, well, this is very important. I mean, judiciary and the reform of the judiciary is very high on the agenda. It goes in tandem with economic development, and we are fully aware of the necessity. I will only mention the troubles and the difficulty the Gülenist coup caused in 15, and sorry, on 15th of July 16, and that was a very heavy blow to our judicial system, and I would say we lost 1/3 roughly of our judges and prosecutors, which it was a heavy blow. And so it was like up to now trying to pave the road while the heavy traffic is continuing. So that's not an easy job. And you have to keep the traffic flowing and not lead to a pileup in the legal system and also the economy. So our judicial system, I must say, has been very, very active, as our frontline doctors and nurses have been during the COVID pandemic. It's been an emergency going on for years. So inevitably, it has taken its toll, and we are fully aware that not everything is rosy. There is a lot of maybe development that can be made, and we are determined to do that. So we have to wait for the package for judicial reforms. I understand that there is a determination to align ourselves more with the EU standards and norms, which is a good thing. It also feeds into our general drive towards re-energizing the EU relationship. So we are all very hopeful, and we will follow this closely. But it's not an easy thing, of course, as we all know. And although the intention is very good, and we will put our best effort into it, we also need some empathy and support from our friends. So we need a little more patience for everything to pick up. But the drive is there, and we'll see the results soon, I hope.
All right. Thanks very much, Ambassador. I'm going to open this next one up to you both, if that's we can do it in a timely way, because it reflects on both countries. And as while the CTBC has been involved in various well-attended online events to promote bilateral trade and investment, due to the pandemic, we have been unable to lead a business mission to Turkey in over a year. As you may recall, there was the last business mission, major business mission we were involved with, had over 60 people on it, with great meetings in Istanbul and Ankara. And likewise, there have been no major Turkish delegations in Canada since the onset of the pandemic. So what do you see as some of the remedies that can be used to reignite the Canada-Turkey economic relationship so that we can quickly reestablish business momentum that existed prior to COVID-19?
Ambassador Kokar, would you like to say a few words?
Sure, I'd be delighted to. Thank you, Kerim. Well, you know, as an old trade commissioner, we always tend to rely on getting, as they say in the military terms, boots on the ground, right? So you want businesses to be active in each other's markets, to see each other's markets, to engage with counterparts at senior levels. I think, as Kerim mentioned, we should actually look at this technology as a bit of an opportunity. You could have taken 30, 40, or even 60 people last year, and we have over 120 people on this video call right now. And there's an opportunity that perhaps we're not really looking into. In fact, the way that we're designing and looking at this next JETCO, this Joint Economic and Trade Commission meeting, is it's not for us a one-day event or a two-day event. We've already started on a series of events. So the program that was held a few days ago on agriculture was what we would call one of the lead-up events. And we are planning on doing a series of those between now and the actual JETCO, where we are engaging with companies directly. We're taking little TEDx type short videos of the conversations that are being held. We'll roll those up into like 2-minute, 3-minute snappy kind of report outs to the entire trade community, and then hopefully hold kind of online Davos style conversations, moderated conversations with one or two key interlocutors that allow for the general population of business people that are interested to engage with those individuals directly. I actually think that's a much more inclusive, much broader way of reaching out across a variety of different ways. Sometimes you can only afford to have a few companies pay that much to get on an airplane and come and see each other. This is actually democratization, if you will, of the trade agenda to actually include more small and medium-sized companies that can't either afford the time or the money to be away from their businesses for that long. So with a little creative thinking, I think there's a lot to be said about what we're planning to do and looking ahead. It'll take a year to kind of get used to the new way of doing things, but I think you might actually look back and say this is a far more interesting and engaging way of involving people into the agenda. And like I said, those who can afford to sort of get on planes and come, that's great. But those who come tend to be, and I don't want to be overly critical, but I've been doing this for 30 years now. I'd like not to admit that, but it's been over that. It's kind of as I say, the same old of the constituents that normally are interested in each other's markets. And I think the challenge for us is reaching to a new cadre of businesses that are interested and in generating a certain degree of enthusiasm and interest in the market. And perhaps this technology allows us to do that.
I agree. If I may add, with your permission, if you've completed. Yes. Well, 1919 was a record year in trade, but as we all know, it couldn't have continued. But still, it's proven quite resilient, our trade of 2 billion, close to 2 billion. And but when you compare that Canada is a market of 1.6 trillion US dollars and Turkey 650 billion. When you add them together, you've got $2.225 trillion. This is a huge amount. In that, I mean, our trade is a drop in the bucket. So it doesn't reflect the potential at all. not only size-wise, but also talent-wise or capital accumulation-wise. There's much, much more we can do. And I think we are making headway in getting organized, but there's still a lot we can achieve. Now, where are the bottlenecks? One of the bottlenecks is standards and procedures. For example, in the health sector, we are trying to address that. And Health Canada will come to Turkey and look at our health system and accredit our health system for Canadians. That, I think, will be a positive development. We are working on that. Next month, talking about the health sector, next month I think it's the 28th of February, we will have a webinar with the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada, and also a lot of participants from Turkey, large hospital chains, and also universities and others. So I hope we'll be again together with my distinguished colleague, Ambassador Kokar. So that is the health sector. It's a promising sector. And of course, a bottleneck is accreditation. Then again, another bottleneck is transport. With this distance, there are two ways to reach each other's countries. One is, if we don't count this webinar, I mean, the web and virtually, but in physical terms, we need planes or we need ships. Planes is addressed by Turkish Airlines, but not enough. We would like to fly more. During the COVID times, Turkish Airlines managed to shift to increasing its cargo flights, so that kept up our trade going. And we want to soon start our direct flight to Vancouver. That was nearly starting had COVID not come. But we are still determined for that to happen. So we will have 3 direct links soon, hopefully, and that will open up the west of the country for us. So it will be Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto. But we could easily double the flights without having any adverse effect on flag carriers like Air Canada or any others. That would be additional business, and it would be beneficial for both countries. So that's another bottleneck I would like to mention. Another one I see is the legal infrastructure between our two countries. I'm amazed to see that it's not as developed as it should be. Two big economies of this size, two allies, I think we should have a much more sophisticated legal framework. Actually, we are working on that quite intensely with Cemal Bey. And one is to re-energize the mutual investments, yatırımların karşılıklı teşviki ve işbirliği anlaşması, promotion of and protection of mutual investments, and also, if possible, a free trade agreement. Of course, the free trade agreement is a larger umbrella. We signed one with the UK, preparing the ground for post-Brexit in a very short time. So I know from experience, also when I was working with the Prime Minister, that we managed to push one through with Singapore in a week. And I think our work is quite mature. If we can't do it in a week with Canada, we can do it within a year, I'm sure. So I visited Mr. Verheugen, who is your chief negotiator, and pre-COVID, the intention was there, but the bandwidth was taken up by other countries. But now I think we can readdress that issue. So that would enable us to overcome another bottleneck. If we do these, I'm sure it will develop the relations. Ships, I know there is a Turkish investor interested in purchasing 2 container ships and increasing regular sailing between Istanbul and St. John's, and maybe with feeders from there to Montreal and Toronto. So that would be very good. It would definitely increase trade and bring down costs, because at the moment there is a direct line, MSC lines. It departs from Istanbul and calls on Liverpool and then comes to Montreal. But that's it also sometimes calls on other ports, which makes it cumbersome and costly. So we could definitely make some headway on that. Maybe we can at one point touch up on which sectors are promising. I will just mention some headlines here, I mean names, but if you are interested, we can go into them with more detail. Shipping is one of them. Air travel, of course, is another. Health, pharma is definitely interesting. Contracting and infrastructure is very, very promising. We brought a big delegation in June 19, and they were interested. They met 4 ministers in Ontario, and there's a wave of investment coming in Canada, so they are interested. You know, Turkish contractors are number 2 in the world after China. And according to the Engineering News record, we are in the top list in the world. So we could make definitely more use in that sector. Furniture and appliances, tourism, mutual investment in third countries. We already had good news last month or the month before. A Turkish contracting company is investing together with a Canadian company in building a railroad in Mali. So that's a very good example. We could multiplicate those. Foodstuffs, education, textiles, services, IT, defense. These are all sectors which are very promising. In defense, as you know, we have some problems. I find this very hard to understand why we still have this problem, because we are 2 NATO allies. It initially begun with our operation in Syria, but since then about more than a year has passed, and you've seen that it's actually stabilized the region rather than undermining it. So we are carrying a heavy burden of 3.5 million Syrians and 500,000 others. So that's a big burden for the Turkish economy, but we are bearing that very heavy weight without, uttering a word of complaint. So we expect more empathy in that respect, and maybe that might pave the way to overcome the problems in the defense industry. I think that's another promising sector. Together with construction, of course, construction material is also a very promising sector. So what I want to say in short is that there are promising sectors, there are bottlenecks, and we have to make the most of it and jointly overcome the difficulties. And I think the potential is great.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I think what I'd like to do is just pick up on the points that you've raised on identifying key sectors. And we could look at as well, what are the suggestions for Canadian companies, whether they're in whatever sector. You've mentioned all the key ones, but let's say healthcare, education, these others. And maybe I'll ask Ambassador Kokar to pick up on some of these. How do we establish Canada's presence more firmly in Turkey, and make a larger presence there? Ambassador Kokar, over to you.
Well, thank you for that. So let me just address a couple of comments, and I'm very pleased that Kerim Bey actually did the heavy lift of going through the list of sectors, because if anything should resonate with our audience here, is that it's a long list. Right? There's lots of opportunity here. On the transport side, I can't overcommit my new minister, but let's not forget that he was the Minister of Transport. So he understands the importance of air links, and was probably the one that had to sign off on the agreement for the new routes. So it's nothing like pushing on an open door. And like I said, I can't overpromise, but he's certainly familiar with the importance of the markets on both sides. And I would hasten to add that those air links are not only important for the tourism sector on both sides of businesses to allow to travel back and forth, but another important sector that is often underestimated, but Kerim Bey pointed it out, and that's education. And that Canada represents a key market for education, both secondary and post-secondary education. And there's a lot of good work to be done there. There's been a number of sectors that we've talked about, so I don't want to get into too many of those. The construction engineering side, I think we're being kind of modest in that because it should really be those two companies that are speaking to it. But it's a kind of a chest thumping kind of example, if you will, of the success that you could have between a Canadian and in this case, it's Aecon Engineering, and I don't mind saying that, and Suma from Turkey that is heavily involved and built a railway. I think it was in actually Senegal, but now also pursuing one in other African markets. And so third country collaboration in this particular area is something that we can really work towards. Of course, there's always the financing question that sits behind that, which is always of interest here. And I would be remiss not to put my senior trade commissioner, Chris Wimmer, and his team in Istanbul on the spot. I won't ask him to speak right now, but between he and his colleague in Toronto and Ankara, I think Hakan, there are two trade commissioners on both sides that are equally committed and engaged in advancing this agenda. So you'll be surprised how many companies actually don't reach out to us. So when we actually do get a contact and we do get interest and they're well vetted and experienced companies, I would never advise a company that's never ventured into international markets to try coming to places, dynamic emerging economies, whether it's Turkey or where I was before in Brazil or a place like Turkey. You want to have a certain degree of experience, knowledge, and intestinal fortitude to take on each other's markets. But if you come with that, for goodness sakes, give Chris a call, send him a message to me, knock on Ambassador Uras's door or his trade and economic teams, and we're there to support your work and advance you in the degrees that we can. We can't bring a contract to you, but we can certainly identify reliable, valuable partners, distribution links, address issues of financing, as Kerim mentioned as well. There are standards questions. Sometimes there are investment or legal questions that can be sorted out, but that's what we're there to do. So I'll stop with that, but thank you, Kerim, for laying out that long list and in a very positive way, which actually demonstrates just how much there is that we can be doing together.
Well, thank you both. I'll, if I may, I'll direct this one to Ambassador Uras. In a speech following a presidential cabinet meeting on January the 11th of this year, President Erdogan outlined a 5-year goal of increasing gold production to 100 tons. And in particular, he said, and I quote, "We're working to mobilize resources of our country at the highest level in every field. One of those fields is gold production. Last year, our gold production reached the highest level in the history of our republic with 42 tons. The contribution of this production to our economy is $2.4 billion. Our goal over the next 5-year period is to increase that gold production to 100 tons, which is one of the products with the highest added value." And of course, that's the end of the quote. And of course, as many people on the call will know, certainly the diplomats and anyone from the mining sector, Canada has got a very strong presence in Turkey in mining. And I think it's probably our major foreign investment in the country. But there are, we've talked about the various wrinkles in these in the framework of the relationship. And it seems that the Turkish public is concerned about foreign investment in the gold mining sector. So, Ambassador, I wanted to ask, what advice do you have for Canadian firms looking to invest in mining operations in Turkey? And to what extent might the Turkish government be willing to work collaboratively with any Canadian firms in the event of any public concern on the issue?
Thank you. Actually, that's a very timely question. Thank you, Mike Bey. I omitted to mention mining as one of the most promising sectors, and so the question has come to that. That's good. Indeed, Turkey is in the right slap in the middle of the very extremely fertile Tethyan metallurgical belt, and that means there are many opportunities for mining, and indeed Canada is a very good country in that respect and is already present, and gold being one of them, of course. Now we have, as you mentioned the figures, we do have an intention to increase from 42 to 100 tons of gold. So far, we had 18 Canadian companies and 20 more projects are in the pipeline. So far, we produced 382 tons of gold, but it's a very fertile area. If we invested $6 billion in this and created employment for 13,200 people. So in every respect, it's very good. It's a good sector. And already we are doing good work on that, but there is a lot of scope for increase, as you say. We also do have, mind you, difficulties. Now, I expect the new judicial reforms to address some of the difficulties, but also there is a perception and environmental impact, and this is the drawback in all this. Now, I know from first-hand experience and close contact with very solid Canadian companies that they have difficulties in Turkey, and some of it is because people don't understand the realities, and there is a lot of misinformation out there. Of course, if you want to increase from 42 to 100 tons, you have to open a mine. That means you have to clear the ground. That means you have to cut down trees. And of course, it isn't a pleasant sight when you suddenly find the place where you used to picnic in a forest as a barren desert. You find it very striking if you're a Turkish citizen. And they don't have a direct interest in this. They don't share the produce, only in a very circumvented way through revenue to the state will one day feed back into the system. But in their immediate neighborhood, they see a big scar in the land. So it has and will draw reaction from the people. And we have a very vibrant environmentalist movement like every country does today. And look at nearly issue number 1 of new US President Biden. It is addressing climate change and the environment. So this is a global phenomenon. It's very important. And it gains strength from that sensitivity and perception in the rest of the world. So what I'm saying is this is a fact. On one hand, we want to develop it, and there's no other way than doing that by opening mines. On the other hand, there is a strong movement against it. So what should we do? I think these companies and us jointly, we should all try to explain what should be expected, how this will be put right. It won't damage the environment, what precautions are being taken, and that it will go back to normal. These companies, when I joined PDAC and through our bilateral meetings with Canadian companies, they showed me the same story. I mean, they cut down Canadian forests and went through the exploration and put the soil back without any damage, lasting damage to the environment, and then replanted. And I was very amazed to see that actually the forest that emerged 5-10 years after all this operation was actually much better than the original forest. So this can be explained. I'm not sure we are doing a good enough job in explaining to the Turkish public this case. Of course, there are always going to be hotheads, activists, and people who you can never convince, who say, I don't want it, full stop. But the majority would understand if a good job is done. So I think there is a heavy explaining and PR exercise to be done in that respect. But it is a very important job. That's the main thing I would say. And of course, keeping the channels open and communicating with our authorities is another advice I might give to these companies. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Let me come back to a couple of other, I've got more questions here. Again, if anyone that wants to send in written questions, and we'll get to them. Ambassador, I guess either one could answer. Turkey has been described as an island of relative stability in a turbulent region. How would you advise Canadian companies and organizations that are contemplating engaging with Turkey, but they may have concerns about current regional geopolitical issues in the area?
I think I've said a few words on that. Maybe Cemal Bey can say a few words.
I'm not on mute.
Okay. Would you allow me to add a few words?
No. Let me lead off on that, and then
Sure.
please
Okay.
do go ahead. So let's just address the elephant in the room. And I think Kerim Bey pointed out when we talked about the defense industries in the high-tech sector and the NATO relationship. So let's start there. First of all, as was discussed between the foreign ministers yesterday, as has never been in question, and as we tweet out on this all the time, but it's discussed in Brussels as well. Canada considers Turkey a fundamental and strong NATO ally and partner. So that's the starting point, and it will always be the starting point. And so I think it's very, very important to do that. Now, sometimes there are challenges, and I think Kerim Bey pointed that out on the export permit side. We both abide by look at international obligations. There were some questions that the Canadian parliamentarians and others had with respect to the engagement in the region, and you referred to the Caucasus, and I think, Mike, that's what kind of the subtle question in behind all of that. So let's just kind of get straight to that is all about. As I opened up the conversation and said that as in any good and healthy relationship, the point is to try to work beyond that. And I would happy to say that in December, we got our technical specialists, because it is very technical about what equipment is used when. There are, of those of you that are involved in manufacturing, you will know rules of origin and transformation. So when does a product become a product, and when does it become another product, and when is that product used for something else? So that often happens in tariffs as well, and free trade agreements. So there's a question, and there were questions about transformation of the product, what was used, under what authorities was it used in different environments. So we're kind of sorting through that, which is a little bit about law as well, but as much about understanding each other's protocols more than anything else. And I'm very happy to report and that not so long ago, I guess it was in early December, that we got a fairly large swath of our two technical teams to get into the nitty-gritty a little bit about how we handled those issues. So it is very much about collaborating along those lines. The second thing, and that's coming back to the NATO relationship. So, you know, there are other big actors involved in the region, and as the ambassador has said, we're talking about a very tough neighborhood where there's lots of activities. Whether you're looking at North Africa, right across into Syria, and you know, it was at one point in time not involving Turkey or others, but you know, right into Afghanistan and others. And you know, from a geopolitical perspective, we have to rely on strong partners and allies, and Turkey is one of those strong partners and allies. And so there's always going to be, you know, at the same time, Turkey is a sovereign, independent country with its own national security considerations and its own geopolitics as well. And the more we have these conversations, the better we understand how that fits into a larger strategic global perspective when we address it from NATO's perspective. So our teams are talking in Brussels, they're talking in Ottawa, they're talking here in Ankara. And I think we kind of have to sort of put that all into perspective. So, I mean, I'm not sure if that addressed your question directly. Let me just add one point on another one on the mining question, because I think it is really very important, and I know time is sensitive, but the mining challenge we face in Turkey is no different than the mining challenge we face in Central America, in Brazil, in other parts of Latin America, and that's in the natural resource extraction sector. When you're dealing with the environment, you're always going to have these difficulties. And Canada is happy to collaborate with strong Turkish firms that believe in sustainability, good corporate practices, good social community practices, and they're and they're engaged in that. Now, as the ambassador said, there's always going to be detractors from that. The irony for me in all of this, and you know the story, is that they're often using this very device to send out and communicate their challenges, and yet this would not exist had it not been for the mining sector. When we talk about the transformation away from fossil fuels and into electric vehicles, that is entirely dependent on lithium and lithium batteries, and that would not exist without the mining sector. So, you know, those of us in government, we understand that we need to work on the communication side, the outreach side, the engagement in the community side. And that's a long haul, and it always has been, and I suspect it will be for a long time coming. But I think the importance here is that both Turkish companies and Canadian companies have a very strong record and good corporate social practices, sustainability, and we hold each other's companies to a very high standard, which we're meeting. And we need to work better together to try to address some of the concerns, and legitimate concerns, that come up when new exploration is at stake.
Thank you both.
If I may add, maybe Mike Bay with a few words.
Sure. Please.
Well, thank you, Jamal Bey. That's very kind of you. Looking at it from where I sit, it's like, you know, this famous Western movie, Good, Bad, and Ugly. And when we look at the strategic picture in our region, but we'll put an effort for the good to prevail. And of course, there are difficulties. There are no magic solutions. But don't forget that Turkey has an immense wealth of knowledge and history behind it, and strong institutions. And we have run a large empire for 700 years. So the residue is still there, I would say. And anyone who has any question marks in coming to our part of the world, I would advocate and strongly encourage them to trust the Turkish state and the Turkish institutions. So we can manage a lot of problems. We can manage a lot of problems simultaneously. I think if we make a list of the challenges we face today, many countries wouldn't be able to cope with the first 2-3 of them. It's like we are juggling sometimes 10-20 balls at the same time. So I think the juggling will continue, and trust in Turkey. I mean, looking inwardly, there are very positive signs, which I also, positive aspects which I would like to touch upon as food for thought. For example, our space program, Turksat. This month, we sent up another satellite, Turksat 5A, that will bring internet to the most remote corners of Turkey, the most remote villages, through the KU band. And it will definitely do a lot in spreading economic wealth and bridge the digital divide between the cities and the villages in Turkey, which is already fairly advanced. I mean, they already have connection, but now it will be through Turksat. The 5B satellite will come in June 21, and the 6A satellite, these are all, they will form a chain, and they will have their own particular strengths. 6A is being built locally. It will come online in 22, hopefully. So this is in space. In the air, Turkish Airlines, as I said, is a great company, and it's #1 in the world in the number of destinations. So Turkey, Istanbul is a natural main aviation hub, which brings a lot of business opportunities with it. And it was, for example, through that that we managed to get together Turkish and Canadian pharma companies and health companies, because they were in Turkey anyway, going to the Middle East. So we managed to build something in Turkey, and that's a natural advantage. For your information, Istanbul Airport in 2020 had 23.4 million passengers. That is number one in Europe. If you want to compare, for example, with Heathrow was 22.1, Schiphol was 20.9, and Frankfurt 18.8. So Istanbul, our new airport, is a magnificent building, very streamlined, and Istanbul is a magnificent city. So that is a draw in itself, especially if you call on the VIP lounge. It's very good. Now, a word about contracting. I want to go a bit more on that. To give you a few facts and figures, in the years between 72 to 20, we did 10,525 projects across the globe and accumulated $418.6 billion US through this activity in 128 countries. In 2020 even, we managed to accumulate 14.4 billion US dollars. We are all over Africa. The Summa project, Ambassador, I think is in Mali. It's coming up. You're right, Summa did something in Senegal. They built the airport and other big projects. But this new one, I think, is coming in Mali. We beat the French in the tending and biddings together. So there is a lot of promise there. And one final word about JETCO. We did the first one in November 19, and the second we are looking at June 21. We haven't fixed the date yet, but we are focusing on innovation, education, women entrepreneurship, and mining will be the focus points. So the list we can expand. I'm sure we'll be working with Jamal Bey on that and our relative institutions. So the ministers talked about it yesterday, and then we will give it a push ahead. So there is a lot of opportunity there. Now Istanbul is becoming an international hub. The OECD opened its 5th regional office in Istanbul after Berlin, Mexico, Tokyo, and DC. The UN is turning Istanbul into a regional hub again. So Turkey is actually a very good place. And from there, you can reach out to not only the Balkans and the Caucasus, but further afield to the what we call the stans, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and we are slap in the middle of the Silk Road. That activity is increasing. So Turkey is actually a good place to be in the region. And I would strongly encourage everyone to do their fair share in developing the relations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'm glad you mentioned Turkish Airlines because now, as of last year, they're flying to 3 destinations in Canada, which is terrific. Mm-hmm. And it's a measure of the fact that they're flying to Toronto, frequent flights to Toronto, frequent flights to Montreal, and now to Vancouver. Just a measure of the extent to which Canadian interest has surged regarding Turkey. And it's reflected in the trade numbers and the investment numbers as well, not just tourism, which we're major tourists, of course, in Turkey. I'm glad you talked about some of the policy issues. We have a question. I'll start taking some of these written questions now. And this one I'll give attribution to. This is, I believe, it's from Mark Bailey, former Canadian ambassador to Turkey, which Jamal will know. And Mark's question is, when he served, and I'll read it verbatim, when I served as Canadian ambassador to Turkey, there were very preliminary discussions about a possible free trade agreement. Turkish officials argued that their customs union with the EU meant Canada was obliged to negotiate an agreement with Turkey to accompany our agreement with the EU. Can either ambassador comment on this matter, especially now that CETA is provisionally applied? Are there any talks planned or underway?
Should I say something about this with your permission?
Sure, and then I can jump in, sure.
Okay. Yes, this is the desire, but it's not automatic because we all know and agree and are sorry that it's one of the shortcomings in our customs union with the European Union that we failed at the time to negotiate the automaticity of international agreements to Turkey. So, in other words, like if the EU goes and makes a free trade agreement with Korea, that through the back door automatically applies to Turkey, but Korea doesn't have to give the same benefits or the same access to the Turkish economy in the other direction. This is a problem, and I think this also affects business with Canada. So CETA, I don't know how this is going to apply to Turkey, but now we are addressing this not only with Canada, but also with the EU. And we are revising our customs union. We are in the process of doing that. I think it's in tandem with economy reforms, this migration, big waves of migration and everything. So this is part of the discussion. And I think Ambassador Bailey is very right in pointing out this matter. It's very fundamental. Thank you.
There's nothing more dangerous than having a predecessor ask you questions. Well, good to hear from you, Mark, and thank you for all your great work that you had done in establishing that relationship so many years ago, and delighted that that you're still actively engaged. I understand just not only a week ago that you were speaking to former colleagues on Turkey as well. So I'm glad to hear that you're fully engaged and involved. So I think there are 2 points here to add to what Kerim Bey has said. Well, first of all, is that on the FTA, as you well know, one of the challenges for the negotiating teams has to be driven by very strong commercial interest in driving that forward. And so I think that the numbers of people and companies that are involved here, the more they engage directly with our respective senior offices and back in Ottawa to express that very real interest, because it is about advancing commercial relationships. So you're a constituency and you have to sort of play to that. It's not, governments do create the enabling environment, but it has to be driven by business to demonstrate the need and the demand for that sort of work. Part of that, because our relationship with Turkey is so advanced, so much of the work that goes into an FTA with a country like Turkey revolves around investment protection. And as the ambassador laid out earlier, one of the things that has been a blockage or something that we had been hoping for a while is the FIPA, which is a Foreign Investment Protection Agreement. And for a couple of years now, this has been held in abeyance to a certain degree until a new model had been approved to be approved by a minister or Minister of Trade at the time. So we're happy to report, and I think I mentioned this maybe a month ago or a few weeks back, is that the new model has now been worked through at the level of bureaucrats or officials and is now sitting with the ministerial offices for approval. Once that model has been approved, and it's just not a bilateral one, it's the model that gets approved globally. Once that model has been approved, it allows the teams then to go out to start to negotiate on that. And I would argue actually the FIPA is probably a more material agreement between Canada and Turkey, because so much of what we do is investment related, whether it's in the mining sector or others. Once you do a FIPA, then that lays the groundwork for a larger FTA that then takes into account other sort of tariff related and customs related issues. So it's slower than I think anybody wants, certainly slower than I think either of us as ambassadors would want or the trade committee wants. But I'm delighted to see that there's been some progress made, and I don't have to simply repeat the overworn line that was still waiting for a model to be approved. It's now been done, and it's now we're looking forward for approval, and I think that sets the next steps.
Thank you very much. I'll take a few more questions, written questions that have come in, and then I think we'll call it quits in about 10 or so minutes. This is for the high-tech sector. It appears that Turkey is an emerging hub for advanced technology development, as reflected in the growing number of accelerator programs and technoparks. can the ambassador, I'm not sure who's being referred to here, but can the ambassador give us a sense of the scope of government support in this area? So perhaps the Turkish ambassador.
Yes, thank you. This indeed is an area we are very interested in developing. And we do have strong incentives to participate in these technoparks and bring technology and do joint business. There are very successful stories, and it is ongoing. I don't know the exact number, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, there were, tens of good technoparks across Turkey. There's also TÜBİTAK, our national institution, and they are also very active. They have a place in Gebze research area. If there's any concrete interest in any program or incentive, if they contact us or our trade offices in Toronto or in Ottawa, we would be very happy, or the consulate generals in Montreal or Vancouver, we would be very happy to see what we can do. But I know that there are very good incentives. I also suspect that that will be part of the package to be announced by the president in February. So this is definitely a sector we are very interested in.
Thank you.
Mike, may I add to that?
Please.
Well, so this is a question that's very near and dear to my heart. I'm very enthusiastic about the whole area of innovation and entrepreneurship. And part of the focus of the JETCO moving ahead will be on very much so on innovation, and it's innovation across sectors. So, whether it's innovation does not always mean just ICT. It's innovation in the mining sector, it's innovation in agriculture, it's innovations in a whole variety of things. So part of what we're going to be doing is trying to identify young startups. There's a very, as Ambassador Üras has said, there's a very healthy startup ecosystem in Istanbul called Istanbul Startups. We've got a very strong network of the kind of the second largest Silicon Valley in North America. It's in the Kitchener-Waterloo area. We've got a very strong hub in Canada. Chris Vimmer and I and others are already in touch with CEOs that are extremely well-known CEOs. You know them, but out of respect for this program, we're already talking about establishing initiatives between Turkey and Canada along the area of communications, high-tech communications. We've talked to young startups that are linked in with Canadian VC money, venture capital money, that are giving them a chance to leap beyond Turkey and enter Canada as young companies to attack not only the Canadian, but the North American market, which is, of course, a much larger enterprise when we think about it. So part of our effort around JETCO is to bring heat and light, if you will, to the question around how do we incentivize and create a little bit more dynamism around the area of venture capital for startups, to encourage investments in each other's companies, to encourage new companies across a variety of sectors, but in that kind of that startup ecosystem, which again comes down to whether the technoparks in Turkey or technological parks and institutions in Canada. And just to end on one note, without shouting out for any one institution, in the University of Waterloo with the president, we spoke about a month and a half ago. They have a very dynamic, of course, programs both through their business school as well as through an accelerator. And we're talking about a special incentive program to incentivize Turkish companies and individuals to be able to come and do a kind of, if you will, startup boot camp. And of course, in addition to that, we want to bring some specific kind of attention to young women and girls who are involved in entrepreneurship and give them a special facility to be able to become more successful both here in Turkey and internationally. So sorry for the real jump, but this is something that I feel very, very strongly about. I left government for 4 years to work in Southern California on the innovation agenda. And when you look at the potential that exists between Turkey and Canada, it's huge. And I think that we should all bring some real effort to advancing that.
Well, Jamal
If I
Bey,
may
sorry, yeah,
to-
go ahead, please.
Mike Bey, with your permission, if I may add to Jamal Bey's comment, that's very kind. I forgot to mention that TÜBİTAK was about to open a contact office in Canada. Then they were thinking about Montreal, but in any case, they are going to open it. And this is also going to facilitate activity in both directions in this field. We brought a large delegation pre-COVID. It was, I think, 50, 60 business people from all across the technology sector. They were very interested in Canada. And I know there is interest in the other direction too. I know from the business people in Canada that the investments made in Turkey, the success rate is far higher than other parts of the world. So I think that's a good reference point for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Ambassador, for mentioning TÜBİTAK. We have a question on that. What I'll do is, since it might take a bit of time to answer, I'll send it to both of you, written, and then await your response, and I'll pass it on then to the individual who sent it in. But I think the answers to that previous question really set the stage for this next one, because in some respects, Canadian firms have been relatively slow to recognize the vast potential to invest in Turkey. It's not for the lack of efforts of Canadian Turkish diplomats to bring that to the attention of Canadian firms, for example. And you know, Jamal, Ambassador Kokar was talking about his outreach. You could sense the enthusiasm in his voice about the high tech sector, and certainly that spirit, that eagerness to raise that profile, to invest in Turkey, it stretches all the way back to when Mark Bailey was running the shop in Turkey. So, can either one of you, can you name some Canadian and international success stories of firms that have invested in Turkey, and then now use it as a platform to export, you know, to manufacture in Turkey and perhaps to export to third country markets? And the reason I think for this question is that that it's to give Canadians a glimpse of, you know, of the how strong or foreign firms are involved in Turkey. They use it as a platform to invest. Microsoft uses it to invest to over 100 countries. I think if we could maybe end on this question, unless you have anything else in particular you'd like to raise, this would be a good point to do that. Either one.
Jamal Bey, would you like to? You're over there, so you would know better than I.
Sure. Well, look, there's and I think there's different ways of cutting this. So let's just get to, one of them is one of your constituents as well. It's AGT, who has done a fantastic job on exporting. I think everybody kind of knows that, and that's not to diminish it at all, but they are clearly the leader as an example and a shining example of what you can do in terms of both the domestic market, but also using Turkey as to penetrate regional markets from here as well. You know, I suspect that Magnum probably has some engagement in the automotive sector. I think where what we're trying to do on the automotive side, for example, Chris and I are working with Tobe in terms of the new electric vehicle and bringing AI technologies into the manufacturing supply chain. The same goes with working with Arçelik and Koç Industries and the work that they do in terms of hard what we used to call in the old days, I know what they call them today, white goods, but I guess they call them appliances now, that go to the European markets, but that have now AI built into it, and we have a very strong AI sector in Canada, and we're looking at working with Koç to build supply chain access into that. I think that's part of the reason why we want to go to it. As I'm now thinking out loud, The aviation sector, as Kerim Bey pointed out, is an extremely important one. The aerospace sector generally, I shouldn't say just aviation, but aerospace generally. Both on the Turkish side, we know that there's interest in collaborating with Canadian firms to establish themselves in Canada to address both Canadian and North American and global markets, tying themselves into the very vibrant and strong Canadian aerospace industry as a whole, as sub-suppliers and suppliers to larger manufacturers, both in North America and and globally. So there are a few examples, and when I say few, there are only just a few compared to many others, but I think it speaks to the potential that's also there.
I may add to that. According to my notes, there are 457 Canadian capital companies in Turkey, and they've invested 1.3 billion Canadian dollars. That's the 47th foreign direct investment outward, according to Statistics Canada. So the names I can't mention, but these are general figures I have. I would also, in this context, like to underline the potential in shipping, Mike Bey. Now we are doing. Turkey has a strong shipping sector, and it started 1,000 years ago, 1081 to be precise, in Alanya during the Selçuk times by Keykubat, and since then it's developed and evolved, and today we are now focusing on like building electric ships. Also, we are building 4 frigates. We have launched 4 frigates. Turkey is quite successful in that area, and we are now building Anadolu, which is a helicopter plane, vertical lift landing ship, a big aircraft carrier. I mean, big in size, but small aircraft carrier compared to other aircraft carriers. So that is also being built indigenously. Now, this sector has a lot of cooperation in Canada. They have already built 4 ships on the West Coast in Vancouver, Seaspan. I visited there. There are 15 engineers, Turkish engineers working in Seaspan, and they were very happy with the work and cooperation with Turkey. They said, since we started cooperating, that brought our costs down to 1/5, which is quite a good cost reduction. And what they are doing is their Turkish ship designers are 1/5 cost, ship designing bureaus. But also they build parts and take them over and assemble them in Seaspan like Lego. And we also sent another quite advanced ship to St. John's, Newfoundland, on the East Coast this time, called the Calvert. It was sent over in 2020, recently, at the cost of, I think, $55 million. They are also happy with that ship, and they are looking at maybe ordering new ones. So this shipping industry is very promising. The other day I participated in a webinar by the Canadian Institute, and it was about ship costs. Canada is building 15 frigates at the cost of around 30 billion, but I think the costs has spiraled out of the roof, and they were looking at ways about how to bring that down. So I made the case briefly that Turkey is the place to look. And I mean, you might subcontract it. That's done all the time. It's never late to cost cut and to divert business. So being a NATO country also gives us a great opportunity in that respect. One of the participants in that webinar I mentioned said that, well, Korea, and I said, well, it's not a NATO member, and also we can deliver lower prices, better quality, also better than China. So we are quite strong on quality and price. So I want to leave that with you. I don't know, maybe some participants might be from the maritime sector. So I want to leave that as food for thought with you. And also, Cemal Bey touched upon education. I think education is promising, and now Canada has become the #1 destination for Turkish students in the world. And it's a very welcoming country, a beautiful country, also very high quality education for a very reasonable price. So that's another sector we should maybe even further develop. There might be bottlenecks in immigration work, but that is normal. That happens in every country. Maybe we could, I failed to mention that in the bottleneck area. Maybe we could also address that down the road. So to end my words, I would say that potential is really great. Thank you, Mike.
That's great. So I was going to ask if there are any last words from either one of you. Anything you'd like to add before we officially thank you?
I won't say much. I'm going to leave the last word to Kerim Bey, because this is really his thing. So I'm going to interject before he has the last word. So let him have the last word. First of all, thank you very much for organizing this, Mike, and to thank you to your membership for their participation. And we had a good dynamic conversation a while ago. I think this is really, really important that we continue this. There's lots of potential, and I think that's a word that's come up over and over and over again. The point is following through, right? It's never about potential. It's all about following through and taking advantage of that, and understanding that there's risks and there's challenges, but that's what we're here to help try to work through. You know, we know the challenges around the FTA. We're going to try to work on that, the FIPA and everything else. And I think part of it is the work that needs to be done is really kind of evangelistic work on both sides, and to try to get more companies engaged, not only just as a business community, but also to demonstrate to the governments, certainly the Canadian government, that there is an overwhelming degree of interest and to advance some work with Turkey, and that always helps us to move things forward. I'm always about constituency building, and I think you're a very dynamic group of business people, and the more we can bring to that agenda, because at the end of the day, the investment dollar is limited, and it's always looking for markets. So the more we can create a certain degree of a buzz and interest about the potential for this market, both domestically, but also regionally. And I think it's very important that we think about Turkey as a jumping off point for not only domestic market, but regional market, European markets, and Middle Eastern markets and further afield. So again, thank you for your commitment. Thank you, Mike, for your energy and everything that you bring together and hosting something like this. I'm always happy to participate and always happy to engage with your membership on their interests with Turkey.
I would also like to, first of all, thank Ambassador Kokar for his kind words and also for participating. His presence gives us strength and makes it more interesting for sure. I think we should do more of these, and it definitely is good. Maybe we can be more targeted and split into sectors, so then we could drill more specifically. But this is a good start, and I would like to thank Minister Garnatson and also Mike Bey for his idea, first of all, and also his energy. And we must support CTBC. I see many friends in the ranks. I can't mention them one by one because of the number, but we have left 68 participants at the moment. But I would thank them all. It's, I know, dinner time in Turkey as we are approaching afternoon in Canada. So it's a pleasure to see you even from a distance. And thank you for coming and participating. I really enjoyed this session, and let's repeat it soon. Thank you all.
And with that, I'd like to introduce Omar Al-Khatib, who's going to thank our keynote speakers.
Like Saeed Kachin, Ambassador Kokar, On behalf of CTBC and all of our participants today, certainly thank you both for your leadership in the area of growth of bilateral relations between Canada and Turkey, as we've seen our commercial and cultural relationships grow between the two countries over the recent periods. If I may just make a quick comment from a sectoral standpoint, Canada, specifically Saskatchewan, the province I'm in, has had a strong relationship in the agricultural area with Turkey for many years, being the second largest, Turkey being the second largest market for Canadian grown lentils and pulses, Canada being the top origin for lentil supply in Turkey. Turkey is also one of the leading destinations for Canadian durum wheat, which is also grown in Saskatchewan, used in pasta production in Turkey. Turkey being the #2 pasta producer in the world, estimated to soon be #1, and other agricultural products from Canada as well. Turkey is a key market, as Ambassador Kokar mentioned, for AGT, both as a market and as a base of operations in the region. At present, trade volumes in the agricultural sector are high. There are some issues in the agricultural sector, however, that have been impediments to trade between the two countries, and hopefully these will be discussed and resolved as part of the upcoming JETCO discussions and future FTA discussions as well, to remove these impediments and continue trade in agriculture. Mike, as always, well done in organizing a fantastic event, wonderfully attended with excellent content and excellent questions for our panelists. Your Excellencies, again, on behalf of CTBC and all the participants on the call today, we thank you for your time, for your expertise, and for your leadership in engaging with this group and many others and working with us towards our common goal of developing business and cultural relationships between Turkey and Canada. Thank you so much for attending.
Thanks very much. Thanks to you all. Remember, the CTBC is here to help Canadian businesses. We're working closely with officials on the JETCO. We're recruiting members. We're hoping to expand our membership this year. So please follow up on the suggestions of both ambassadors to work with us as well. Thanks to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.